Hello and welcome back to the Stronghold. I'm the Magi, and you know what time it is, and we're gonna get our midweek magic on. This week's midweek magic is none other than the beloved Historic Brawl format. And even though we were only given 1 day's notice of a format change, we are still here for you with one of the most powerful and most winning commanders in the meta, and a full 100 card deck list that can primarily be built from your new player experience. It might not be quite as powerful, but it's going to get you through the event. But before we get into all that, allow me to do the awkward thing and promote the channel. A while back, one of my viewers was kind enough to point out that we are the only channel putting out timely midweek magic content. So be sure to subscribe right here at the Planeswalker Stronghold for all of your future midweek magic needs, because we will be bringing you a deck list or strategy every single week. So what do you say we put all this aside and just get to that? When you look at the Historic Brawl meta right now, and these data figures were just pulled literally Monday evening, there is a number of very powerful and, well, frankly, kind of scary decks out there. And in the top 10, it's pretty much all A-list gold. But when you get to number 11, you find our boy Rusko the Clockmaker, who is not only part of our new player experience, but the third highest win rate out of this sample, and a deck we can build very, very easily from the new player experience. We are giving up a little bit of power because, frankly, the version of the deck that they're showing here is just chock full of wild cards, and maybe that's not the best investment to make right now. But what we've got for you is a version that is virtually wildcard free, and in fact I'd say you could build it with 0 wildcards no problem, although I do have 2 suggestions that I think are worth consideration. You will be surprised at just how many people end up conceding to this just based on your commander, because while Rusko is powerful, he is also a little bit hated within the meta. That's right, our boy the Clockmaker also makes people pretty irate. And in fact, to be perfectly candid, Rusko is the reason I really backed away from Historic Brawl for almost a year now. I think this is going to be my first major step back into it. And I do, of course, embrace the irony that the very card that drove me away is the card I'm using to come back. For the 2 mana, 1 blue, 1 black, 4 total mana cost, 3/3 legendary creature human artificer, the base stats really aren't that much. What really tends to get people a little bit irate, particularly in Historic Brawl, is when it ETBs, it conjures a card named Midnight Clock onto the battlefield. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell, put an hour counter on each permanent you control named Midnight Clock. Each opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. So it's definitely a big tempo hit, as well as a 2-point life swing every time you cast a non-creature spell. Now let's take a look at Midnight Clock. And I believe that the clock itself is the, well, if you'll excuse the borderline pun, beating heart of this deck. It's usually a 3 mana artifact, but of course Rusko lets us put it into play for free. You can tap it for a blue mana, so right away it begins to accelerate and pay you back on mana. You can also pay 2 colorless and a blue, put an hour counter on Midnight Clock. Then at the beginning of each upkeep, that's right, each, not just your upkeep, you put an hour counter on Midnight Clock. When the 12th hour counter is put on Midnight Clock, shuffle your hand and graveyard into your library, then draw 7 new cards and exile Midnight Clock. That is just an incredible bit of reset, so to speak, putting your hand as well as your graveyard back into your library and essentially starting over. Just a lot of tempo there. You're drawing 7 new cards. If you time this right, you could very easily have an empty hand, so it really is drawing 7 cards. And let's not forget, because of our commander putting this into play and the recurrent nature of commanders, we might end up with 2 or 3 copies of Midnight Clock on the battlefield all at once. It really becomes a degenerate amount of card draw. Now, the deck that we're about to look at does not lean as heavily into the mechanics encouraged by our commander. It's got a lot of creature base as opposed to non-creature spells. So it's not quite as efficient at abusing the clock as some other versions of the deck, but it also has more standing power as a mid-range because of the creatures in the deck. So to put together Rusko, I basically wanted to make a list that was going to be extremely accessible for even very new players at this point. So the entire deck is literally made of things strictly from your new player experience, with 2 exceptions. The first being the old sad robot. We miss you, brother. Solemn Simulacrum, 4 mana 2/2. When it ETBs, you may search your library for a basic land card, which we've got a few, and put that card onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffle. When it dies, you may draw a card. It's just an absolute value engine. This is one of those cards that I recommend year after year after year as a great way to start your Brawl collection in the historic avenue. The other card that I suggest year after year is Fabled Passage. This is a rare land that can fit into any 2-color deck that you're running to help you smooth out your mana. Unlike doing a dedicated 2-color rare land that can only fit in those 2 colors or combination thereof, Fabled Passage will fit into deck after deck after deck, and I think it is one of the rare wild cards to consider spending first as an additive to your collection. All right, now let's take a look at the deck in a little more detail. The land base is pretty simple, 36 basic lands split evenly between islands and swamps. And we also have the rare dual land from the new player experience, as well as the 2 common tempo lands. We have the ubiquitous command tower, because after all, we are playing Brawl. We talked about Fabled Passage, and I'm also including Arcane Signet here as part of the mana base. At the next column over, this super long one, is our good stuff cards. These are pretty much all the rares and high impact cards that give you card advantage, high value, etc., that I don't think really need much explanation, and as such, I'm not going to. Skipping over to the other end of things, of course, Rusko is our commander. He's just fantastic, and believe it or not, you're going to see people concede just because you're running Rusko as your commander. There's, particularly in a midweek Magic event, there's going to be people that just don't have time for that and aren't going to mess with you. So you'll get probably on average 1 easy win out of that if you're only going for 3. Overall, the next column is cards that I have included for tempo reasons. Runa's Vortex allows you to bounce, impeding momentum allows you to stun down. Vesuvian Mist allows you to get a card back. Preening Champion is just an embodiment of card advantage and a really great common card in that respect. Unsealed Necropolis is again getting cards back from the graveyard. Diminishing Returns is a living embodiment of getting it back from the graveyard. Pylon is actually in the wrong column. We will talk about that in a moment. And last but certainly not least, Frost Strider, a 4/4 body in and of himself. That's kind of hard to deal with because of War 2, but he also allows you to stun out your opponents and deal with their creatures less predominantly. The next column here is all removal, running Final Flourish, Go for the Throat, Tribute to Urborg, Vanquish the Weak, the all wonderful Murder, Pylon, and Black Sun's Twilight. The next column here is really short, but it's your combat tricks, because this is a tempo control style deck. It's not really looking to press into the red zone unless you have a good tactical advantage. But here we have Shore Up to help protect one of your creatures, particularly from removal. Ashnod's Intervention can do a similar thing, plus help you win a combat if need be. Like I said, this really isn't what the deck is trying to do, but there's a couple pieces here for it just in case. From here, we have basically cards that allow you to draw or gain significant card advantage. Corrupted Conviction, March Towards Perfection, Experimental Augury, Impulse, Moment of Truth, Eyes of Gitaxis, Grey Haven's Navigator, Phyrexian Espionage, Meeting of the Minds, Testament Bearer. We touched already on Solemn Simulacrum and Phyrexian Gargantuan. And this last column of, 7 cards are more or less filler cards that I am using from the new player experience to fill these out. These are the ones that I would consider cutting most readily if you want to fill in other cards from your collection, because of course, even if this is your first day, you have probably opened a couple packs or something like that, and you might have some better cards or things that you want to experiment around with. And hey, just in case you didn't catch all that, Matt would like you to know that the deck list that we discussed in this video is going to have a link down in the doobly-doo to take you over to Aetherhub, along with a link to any other alternative lists that you might wish to consider. He only asks that you give it a little thumbs up when you're over there checking out the deck list. And I plan on live playing this event on Wednesday at 11 a.m. over on my Twitch channel, so definitely stop in and check it out. Because the Stronghold is so much more than just a YouTube channel, and you can find links to all of our other social media outlets in our profile. Because at the end of the day, we're all budget players. And as a community, we're stronger together. So like, comment, subscribe, follow, do all those things to show a little love. It's appreciated more than you know.